Some level 1 and level 2 students engaged community members, exposed obstacles to self-governance at a school board meeting where the board narrowly approved adoption of a sex education curriculum sponsored by Planned Parenthood. So they didn't win that one, but they sure made us think out of it. Up in Show Low, CSG students used an inside and outside game. Those are techniques that you learn in level 4 training to defeat photo radar cameras and expose obstacles to self-governance. So the people that oppose this effort expose themselves by their positions on that. So that's intelligence that we then use later to strategize. Down in Mesa, CSG students worked as a team to research issues important to the city. They polled the citizenry in support of a self-governance candidate who's running for mayor. Using their techniques, he was able to assemble a team of more than 50 people that are working on his campaign right now. In fact, I was a meeting with them last week, and I'll tell you what, these guys are gung-ho. If you think the Southeast Valley is a little too left-leaning, there's some folks working to fix that. So it was very exciting. Also down in Sierra Vista, CSG students succeed in reducing a long list of proposed far-reaching and restrictive new county water regulations down to just 2 reasonable requirements that everybody could live with. So talk about reducing overreaching government. In Tempe, students assisted a Tempe City Council candidate in getting a policy reversed that the council had previously passed that prevented them from broadcasting public comments at city council meetings. I mean, talk about trying to kill transparency in government, right? But these students went down there and they worked with the guy who's actually running for Tempe City Council right now, and they successfully turned that policy around. So, big win there. So, like I said, we're going to be in the back room there for the breakout sessions later, and I would love to tell you a lot more about it. I've got a presentation here that covers in much more detail what we do at the Center for Self-Governance classes and stuff. But I guess the main thing I want to convince you of is that not only do we have a different way of approaching the problem, but the way is working, and we're making some great progress, and it's very exciting. So thanks very much for your attention, and come on back and we'll see you talk about it more detail.
Yeah, that shows you just the corruption level of government. Not wanting to broadcast public comments. That's ridiculous. You know, there are lots of people here, lots of great speakers here that have a very vast knowledge of the Constitution, and I'm proud to introduce our next speaker. I'll find my little sheet. That has been extremely dedicated to not only the movement, you know, for liberty and freedom, but in educating the people around him. And that's Bill Norton. He's the National Support Team Constitutional Coordinator for Tea Party Patriots. He's responsible for developing educational material related to the Constitution for the organization, because we can't rely on the schools to teach the Constitution. We have to know it ourselves and teach it to those around us. Teach it to your grandkids and your great-grandkids, and make sure your kids are teaching it to their kids as well. He has presented the Making of America seminar over 100 times in 40 states. It's amazing. If you ever watched any of Jesse Waters' videos, it's amazing what little information about our country that 20-somethings even have. And Bill is really working to change that. He even presented it to 2 state legislators, and I'd love to know which states had him present that. I think that's very interesting. He's spoken at dozens of Tea Party rallies in the Tea Party movement, including Harvard University. That's impressive, because I would love to have known how that went over there. And he's the chairman of the Arizona State Constitutional Commemoration Committee and the founder of Constitution Week USA. Imagine that, an entire week to celebrate the founding document, the document that's supposed to drive our government. I'd love to see his dedication and passion to the Constitution. Can't wait to hear more from him. Bill?
Yeah.
There you are. I was looking for you.
Well, it's great to be here. You know, the great thing about being here is, you know, I couldn't be seen. Usually I can't be seen because I'm short, but I was actually kneeling down. Can everybody see me okay? No, it's good to be here because I travel all over the country. We go to a lot of different events. Tea Party events just like this, and different other conservative type events and whatnot that the Tea Party Patriots often sponsors. And I don't get to be in Arizona very often. See, I live out in Gilbert, so it still was a little bit of a trip for me, but a lot less than usual. So it's fantastic to be here among my fellow Arizonans. So I've got a couple things that I want to share with you that I think are very important and pertinent to Tea Party Patriots. So basically, to answer your question, the two state legislatures was Montana and Ohio. And it's amazing, when we went and taught those legislatures, that there was about 3/4 of the legislatures attended each of these seminars. And it was really quite remarkable how both parties, they were very excited about learning more about the Constitution. They were very excited to learn that the states are the creators of the federal government, and so therefore the state should have more authority than the federal government, and they were excited about that. That was news to them. So it'd be great to continue on with that and to continue to teach more state legislatures that principle. Because regardless of whether they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever, regardless of whether they're corrupt or whether they're statesmen, this principle of federalism, checks and balances between states and the federal government, is a key principle in the founding of this nation, and it's a principle that doesn't exist hardly at all anymore, this federalism idea. So we definitely need to bring that back. But what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is some brand new stuff that the Tea Party Patriots has been working on. Now, just to give you a very quick overview, because it's always difficult for people to know who's who in the Tea Party movement, and it's fantastic to see all of you here. It's fantastic to see the other organizations that are in the liberty movement, Americans for Prosperity. Whenever we go somewhere and we want to do some work on the ground and we don't have a ground game, we just contact local folks with Americans for Prosperity. We know that they've got activities. We know that we can send people to go and help them out. So what a great organization. And then of course, Heritage Foundation. I mean, they've been at this fight for so long, and how exciting that is to see that they have an activist arm now that can take all that great research that they do. The Center for Self-Governance, an organization near and dear to my heart. I've been involved with developing some of the curriculum with them. And one success that Mike wasn't aware of is these principles that the Center for Self-Governance teaches were implemented a number of years ago, right when the movement started in Gilbert, and we had some amazing successes there. I ran for the Gilbert Town Council about 8 years ago, so before the economy collapsed. Nobody believed us when we said, hey, our town is not prepared for an economic downturn. Everybody said, there's not going to be an economic downturn. Oh, yes, there will, and it's going to come fairly soon. So at that time, there's 7 council seats in Gilbert, and at that time, conservatives didn't hold one single seat. Now, we're very conservative in Gilbert, so even our liberals seem quite conservative, so people would argue with that. But to us, they were all a bunch of liberals, big spenders, and we didn't like them. Not one single seat. Within just a couple of years, once the movement started and we implemented some of the principles that the Center for Self-Governance teaches, we now, today, have 6 out of 7 seats at the Gilbert Town Council. We also have 3 out of 5 seats on our local school board. We also defeated 3 tax increases that Gilbert tried to implement at the beginning of the downturn. In fact, the city of Gilbert was the only city in the metropolitan area here that did not increase taxes to try to solve their economic problems. And guess what the only city is that's in the black today? Gilbert. So not raising taxes actually worked better for Gilbert than all the cities out here that raise taxes. So very exciting stuff. Now the things that Tea Party Patriots have been working on, so the movement started, as you know, 2009, February. Rick Santelli gave his famous rant, there needs to be a Tea Party. And so that got a bunch of chatter going on Twitter and Facebook and whatnot. And so before you know it, there's Tea Party events that are being organized. It was a conference call that kind of started organizing these events. There were 49 events held on February 27th of 2009. And once they held those events, all those people got together again on another conference call, and they said, "This is a great deal. Let's do another one 7 weeks from now, Tax Day, right? 2009. That's when most people are familiar with the Tea Party movement and the Tea Party rallies. It was on Tax Day, 2009. So those core people that on those conference calls, and there's a number of different organizations. I can't remember all of them. Smart Girl Politics and a handful of other organizations that were on this conference call, and they had put up a website so people could register where their events were, and many of you probably registered your events that you had on that tax day. By the time they stopped looking the day before the events, they had about 850 events registered on that website. And so those same core people were the ones that went ahead and formally organized that website into an organization that was Tea Party Patriots. Now the reason why I kind of tell you that is because what Tea Party Patriots has continued to do is we continue to hold those conference calls. Every single week we have conference calls with local leaders all over the country. So if your group is not connected to that call, we ask you to please connect with us, because we don't make a move without a vote from you. Like there's activities that I'll be involved in, or there's a program with education or something that I'll want to do, and I'll get the approval from people there in Tea Party Patriots, but before we actually pull the trigger and put forth effort and time and money, we have a vote. And sometimes if it's an important issue, we'll have a vote on a few consecutive conference calls just to make sure that we're getting a good feel for where the grassroots wants us to be on that particular issue or program. So we want you to be connected so that we know what's going on and kind of what you're feeling and what you're thinking. It's also cool to be on the phone call because sometimes, I mean, to be truthful with you, sometimes they're kind of boring and dry, but other times they're very, very informative, and sometimes they're surprising and entertaining. In fact, I remember a call a couple years ago, and we were talking, I don't even remember the issue that we were talking about, but all of a sudden Jenny Beth Martin gets on and she said, you know, Mark Levin just called in. He was in on the call. He heard what we're talking about. He'd like to jump in and speak to us for a few minutes. And so it's just so we get these opportunities a lot to hear directly from these people that you would all want to hear from and actually be able to ask questions to and things like that.
Why don't you tell them how to get registered to participate?
So the easiest thing is just go to our website, teapartypatriots.org. And I can't give you all the details on how to register because we've just changed the website. And so I don't know the process right now. But if you go there, you can very easily click those registration buttons and it'll walk you through the process. And if you have a problem, there's a help desk phone number that you can call, a real live person that you can call, and then they can give you some help with that. So teapartypatriots.org. Now one thing that some of our local leaders, about a year and a half ago at a local coordinator conference where we brought in a bunch of leaders from all over the country, we asked them, where are your frustrations? What would you like us to work on? And they said, we want you to help us work on messaging. It's just, we're having a tough time. The Tea Party is really being demonized, and we're starting it's starting to be effective. We're not being able to be effective with our friends and neighbors because of the demonization. So help us figure out how to rebrand and remessage. And so that's exactly what we've worked on the last year and a half or so. So I want to kind of give you a brief overview of that. Now many of you, of course, are familiar with this great quote, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now I'm sure that these words ring just as true to you as they do to me, and just as true to Thomas Jefferson when he read the words of John Locke. When John Locke said almost 100 years earlier, the state of nature has a law of nature to govern it, And reason, which is that law, teaches all mankind that being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. Now you can hear in John Locke's quote, you can hear the law of nature and of nature's God, right? You can hear self-evident truths. You hear all men are created equal. And you hear those unalienable rights of life, liberty, and property. So how is it that these two men who span 100 years apart sound so much alike? Now, of course, a crude interpretation of history could be that Thomas Jefferson simply read John Locke and copied him. Now, while there is some truth to that, it lacks a deeper understanding of Jefferson and who he really was and why he had this ability to speak the same words or language as John Locke. It's because if you go through his documents, you can see that this language is all through his documents, his letters and his speeches. And so you can see that he did much more than simply read Locke and copy him. He lived these principles. He learned them. He immersed themselves in the philosophers of freedom. And then he implemented these principles. And so both John Locke and Thomas Jefferson learned how to speak the language of liberty. Now consider this great quote. Thomas Jefferson was asked later in life, where did the Declaration, where did you get the great ideas from? Was it George Mason? People are saying that you copied George Mason's Declaration, Virginia Declaration of Rights, or they copied this or that. And Thomas Jefferson, this is his response. He said, neither aiming at originality of principle or sentiment, nor yet copied from any particular and previous writing, it was intended to be an expression of the American mind, and to give that expression the proper tone and spirit called for by the occasion. So he said, there wasn't any particular document, but I wasn't shooting to be original, and that wasn't my goal. My goal was to speak the expression of the American mind and do it in the proper tone and the proper spirit, right? So as you speak to friends and family, you've probably often found yourselves in situations where you get all tongue-tied and you can't get the logic out, and so you get frustrated, or sometimes you can get that logic out, but you still don't move or inspire them because you haven't put any passion into it, right? And so wouldn't it be great to be able to speak like Thomas Jefferson and John Locke, to speak the language of liberty? You can do it. Every one of us can do it. And we can do it the same way that John Locke and Thomas Jefferson did that. The words that we say are very, very important. So 5 years after the Tea Party movement has started, our core values have not changed. They are still fiscal responsibility, constitutionally limited government, and free markets. And that's kind of a mouthful, isn't it? And so what we've done is we went out and we did a bunch of polling and focus group testing and things like that, not because we wanted to match our message to whatever the polls said, but what we wanted to figure out is our message getting to the American people, and what do they think about this? Well, first of all, we discovered that when we asked them about the Tea Party movement, none of these things came up. So we weren't doing a very good job at helping them understand who we were and what we stood for. In fact, we finally got to the point about a year ago. For the longest time, we still had a majority of the people were supporting us. But we finally got to the point to where it was about 50-50, where about half the people think we're a bunch of radical crazies, and the other half think, yeah, they're probably pretty good. Whereas it used to be, in the early days when the movement started, it was 70-80% of the American people were right with us, right? So it was pretty important that we figure out, okay, how do we take this and speak what we want to put across to the people in the proper words so that they can understand what we're trying to put across. And so we created, after getting a lot of input from local leaders on conference calls, whatnot, and also after doing all these pollings and things, we came up with some really great stuff that I think is very, very valuable. First of all, our new catchphrase, pursue your American dream. right? Pursue your American dream. When we, sorry, I lost my place here. So the first thing that you're going to see on our website is up there on the logo, the Pursue Your American Dream. And this is the way that the American public looks at this. First of all, when we ask them what best describes the American dream, they say freedom overwhelmingly, opportunity, working hard, and being rewarded. So those are the three top things that they refer to when they think about the American dream. Now, here's the sad part. We asked them if they think that the American dream is more or less achievable as it was when your parents were your age. And you can see overwhelmingly in the red is less achievable. Now, you'll notice this polling, you've got, this is the average American, then you have liberals. These are self-identified liberals, which represents about 18 to 20% of the public. These are who I would call progressives, okay? Moderates, which are actually, in this case, liberals. Then you have conservatives, then you have the GOP, the Democrats, independents, and then these are Tea Party favorites. Those are people who favor the Tea Party, and then this last one are people who have no opinion of the Tea Party. So all the charts I'm going to show you basically use this same outline. Now, that's pretty depressing, right? People, not very many people believe that the American dream is achievable. So we've done more than just put that catchphrase there, though. What we do is you'll notice this next phrase, what we stand for. You're used to saying, what does the Tea Party stand for? People ask you that question. You're used to saying fiscal responsibility, constitutionally limited government, and free markets, right? And you feel all smart. I did. You know, when we're doing it, oh yeah, I'm the Constitution guy, constitutionally limited government. But most people, their eyes glass over, they have no idea what you're talking about, right? And so we've got this simple statement. Tea Party Patriot stands for every American and is home to millions who have come together to pursue the American dream and to keep that dream alive for their children and grandchildren. Right? Now, who can argue with that? Nobody can argue with that, and that's the whole point, right? You might be used to answering it with those other three core values, but we've just made it a lot easier to understand, and we've taken the wind out of our opposition's sails by simply putting it down into one sentence. Pursue your American dream, and then this is what we stand for, sentence here. We also have a clear vision. We envision a nation where personal freedom is cherished, and where all Americans are treated equally, assuring our ability to pursue the American dream. Now this personal freedom and equal treatment for all Americans, that's really what we stand for. Isn't that really what we're all about? Equal under the law, follow the Constitution, and leave us alone. Right? Isn't that what we basically boil down to? And that's really all we ask for. Now, as part of that freedom, we do still respect those who disagree with us, but with this new messaging, we're trying to bring more people into understanding this. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we still have, and we always will have, our three core values. Fiscal responsibility, constitutionally limited government, free markets. Of course we will. Core values aren't core values unless they're stable and consistent. But we have changed the wording a little bit and changed the order of them. Now we've enhanced the message around those principles. So first, personal freedom, well, that's the constitutional issue, right? So Constitution, we figure that's got to be first instead of second. Economic freedom is a free market issue. Right? And then the last one, fiscal responsibility, is a debt-free future. Now you see, what's great about this is now people can personalize it. They can interject what their view of personal freedom, economic freedom, and a debt-free future is. Which now gets them involved, directly involved. It allows them to interact with you in a conversation. So the reason why we did all this is because we want to look forward and not look at what has been, but look at what the future holds for us. In fact, there's a great quote that I came across from Thomas Jefferson. He said, "I love the dreams of the future better than the history of the past." So we've learned that Americans want to always hear forward-thinking things, right? When they hear us say, we want to restore the Constitution, we want to go back, we want to take our country back, we keep talking about going back. Now, you and I know what we're talking about. We're talking about restoring principles that allow mankind to progress further than mankind has ever progressed before, right? But that's not what the average American. In fact, we had the last local coordinator meeting we had about 125 local leaders from across the country, and we had them do a personality test. And you know that the majority of the people, almost every single person in that room, was the most rare personality that we find in society. So you are among the most rare. So people don't think like you and I do when it comes to the way that we look at these principles. So that's why personalizing it is a much better direction or angle to go. Now I want to fly through a couple of really cool things. So personal freedom. We support personal freedom. So all Americans can live the life the way they want as long as it does not harm others or infringe on others' rights. Now you're going to find this polling very interesting. So, privacy. When people are asked about privacy versus security, people do not want to give up their basic rights for their for privacy. You can even see liberals, 54% don't want to give up rights for security. Having IRS tax codes to limit free speech, right? This whole targeting the Tea Party. We've got even liberals totally against that, right? But we have to word it correctly. We have to make sure that we are wording it in the language of liberty, with freedom, optimistic, positive. Here's a great one. Replacing Obamacare with a healthcare system that offers real choice and takes government out of the healthcare business. Now you'll notice, because we use the term Obamacare, Democrats and liberals totally disagree with this. But the average American doesn't, 58%. Now watch what happens when we change the wording a little bit. When we say, if there is an organization that stands for healthcare freedom for all Americans, so we can choose our own doctor, health insurance plans without penalty from the government if we do not choose items that they think that we think that we don't need. When we ask them that question, would you support an organization like this? Liberals and Democrats are on board with it, right? So the moment we get out there and attack their guy with Obamacare, they go against us. But the moment we put the principles in, speak the language of liberty. Don't talk about being captives, talk about freedom. Freedom, right? It's great stuff. Executive orders. Everybody disagrees that the president should be able to just do whatever they want with executive orders. Here's a great one. We ask the question, is the Constitution an old, outdated document, or is it a timeless document? 72% of liberals said it's timeless.
Wow.
All this rhetoric that people try to tell us, don't talk about the Constitution because everybody hates it and it's outdated, it's just not true. Economic freedom. I'm going to just jump into a couple more of these slides because I'm down to just my last minute. When we ask people, our economy isn't growing as fast as it should and not enough jobs are being created because our government's spending too much on welfare and not enough to curb deficits and so on. The moment we start talking about welfare and things like that, again, Democrats and liberals strongly disagree with this, whereas everybody else agrees. But when we change our language, when the government cuts spending, it's good for my family and the economy because we'll have more money in our pockets and businesses will have more money to hire new employees. Now, still disagree, but not as bad. Now watch what happens. Growing the economy, cutting spending or raising taxes. We just simply ask that. Should we cut spending or raise taxes? Now we're starting to get liberals and Democrats to agree with us. Cutting spending. If you had an organization that stood for economic freedom, which means growing the economy so we can all have a chance to earn more money and reducing taxes to stimulate economic growth, would you be more likely to support that? 50% liberals, 59% Democrats would. We're explaining us when we're talking about this organization. They support what we believe in. But we've got to use the right messaging. Use freedom language, freedom messaging. So in about a couple of weeks, I don't know the exact date because there's still a couple things left hanging. In a couple of weeks on our website, teapartypatriots.org, we will have 8 presentations that will go through all this polling. We have a presentation on speaking the language of liberty. We have a presentation on how to use this in writing and how to use this to promote your group. We have all these great presentations that you'll be able to watch right on our website and even download a lot of these images and things. On our table over here, I've got a couple of brochures. One brochure tells you all the things that we offer to your groups when you connect with this and the advantage there. This other brochure is just for the general public. It has those 3 core values, talks about them very briefly. So there's bundles of 25. Feel free to grab a bundle or 2 for your group, and then contact us if you need more to get out there to the public, so that helps explain Tea Party. And part of immersing yourself in the principles, if you have never read, I find it hard to believe that there's nobody in here that's hasn't read the 5,000 Year Leap. But just in case, pick up a free copy here. If you haven't read it, grab it. If you know somebody that you want to give one to, grab it. And now, with all that, I encourage you to go forth and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof.
Oh, guys, I have something to tell you about lunch, and Lance is actually speaking after lunch, and he has something to say.
Will the 6 men who have volunteered to help me please come up for a few minutes now? Thank you.
Okay, guys, so now we're heading into lunch. I'm glad to see people are going over to the Tea Party Patriots table. Get that 5,000 Year Leap book. You won't regret it. Special thanks to the Tea Party Patriots for sponsoring the breakout lunch, and Chick-fil-A, our wonderful friends at Chick-fil-A, for providing a very generous discount for the catering. So, they're setting up lunch in the back. When you grab your lunch, you can choose the breakout session you want to attend. Americans for Prosperity will be in the main hall. Heritage Action will be in the back behind the partition. And Center for Self-Government